got to get them to listen to me. For their sakes as well as ours.
How?
Well, it shouldn't be too difficult. Ultrasonics geared to stimulate the fear centers of the brain, something like that.
Why should anybody go to all this trouble to make
Pull to open.
Pull to open!
Yes, and what do you do?
Well, they're a sort of hairy jellyfish with claws, teeth, and a leg.
They're an inscrutable species.
And they both believe it's the other's fault.
I'll get the truth out of them, eventually.
And stop worrying. Come on, sit down.
Here come the drums!
Hello. Welcome to Pull to Open, the ongoing journey that travels in random order through this show that we know and love as Doctor Who. My name's Chris Taylor.
And I'm Pete Paschal, and what else would we know and love it as? I don't know. The one with the blue box?
Well, some of us
show?
fans know it by its Gallifreyan name, but you probably wouldn't know that.
Well, it's usually expressed in Greek lettering, right? When it's in Gallifreyan. The old High Gallifreyan, I believe.
Yes, exactly.
A lot of omegas, etc., thetas, sigmas.
Indeed, that thing. So we've been on the quest for some time, and it has produced some interesting results, not least of which the one that we are at now, which...
Whoa, Chris, before we talk about the one we're at now, why don't you walk us through where we've been recently?
I was teasing the folks, as we are also going to tease them by mentioning that many, many moons ago, we did the Carnival of Monsters, and many, many other moons ago, we did the Green Death. Just thought I'd throw those things in there for no apparent reason in our previously on. 3 stories ago, though, we were at the Unquiet Dead when we were supposed to be at Cursed Black Spot, but we don't talk about that. We talk about the Unquiet Dead instead, who are not quiet. And then 2 stories ago, we zoomed forward in time and backwards in Who chronology to the pirate planet, that Douglas Adams space opera romp. And then the randomizer decided that it really liked space opera, and it took us to another space opera in the Tom Baker era called The Ark in Space. And then it really decided that it liked space opera. It brushed us back again to where we are this week, sandwiched between Carnival of Monsters and another story that it would be a spoiler to even talk about at this stage. It is The Frontier in Space. That's right, folks.
Booyah.
We've gone from the Ark in Space to the Frontier in Space, and we're pretty close to an in-space bingo, I believe. Is that correct, Pete?
We might be. I haven't checked.
I think I looked earlier in the week, and there are like 8 titles with space in them. We've already had dinosaurs on a spaceship, obviously.
Right. So you're not talking about just the preposition "in" is required then. So then, in that case, there's a lot. There's probably like the space pirates and
yes, we've had Frontier from Space. I believe we have a from space bingo. But if you're talking about being in space, then no, there are a few more. There's the Wheel in Space. Mm-hmm. Okay. So we've got the Space Museum, the Wheel in Space
Museum, right?
Yes,
there you go.
The Space Pirates. Spearhead from Space, which we've done. Colony in Space. That's also what we're going to need for an in-space bingo.
Oh, that's an in-space, yeah. We still don't even have the in-space bingo.
Yeah, so we need the Wheel and we need the Colony for the full set.
What do you need for the space opera bingo?
Because, oh, God.
By the way, like the term gets thrown around a lot when you're talking about science fiction. Like, should we define it? Like, what's a space opera exactly?
I mean, it's been kind of loosely used, but it's kind of generally thought of to refer as to like that 1950s style of gung-ho, like vast space empires and ray guns and emperors and political shenanigans on a vast, vast canvas. It's kind of
right.
Generally thought of as a fun romp. It's very much like a soap opera rather than being operatic,
as opposed to like the fat lady singing at the end. And
yes, unless you're the Fifth Element, in which case you have both.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, there's definitely a whole lot of that here in Frontier in Space. And
that's right.
Folks, if you are here only for that commentary, you just want to cut to us talking about Frontier in Space, you can go check the show notes in your podcast app or the notes underneath the YouTube video you are watching, and you will see put there very prominently the exact time code where our commentary begins, which of course always begins with TLDW, where one of us summarizes the story in record time. So go check that out if you want to jump. For the rest of you, though, why don't you accompany us here into the Pull to Open feedback loop? And guys, the best way to show that you enjoy Pull to Open is, of course, leaving a review in the podcast app that you are listening to us on. Especially Apple Podcasts, of course. That's lots of characters you can leave. You can even leave, say, a Doctor Who story title in the form of an emoji, which we would love to talk about on air. But those reviews really do help the show, especially 5-star reviews. I'm just throwing that out there. And if you're not sure how many stars to leave, and it will help make the show visible to more and more listeners who also enjoy great discussion of Doctor Who. The only way to better show your appreciation for this here podcast is, of course, to share the podcast with a friend. And speaking of reviews, when we get them in, we love to occasionally read them out here on the podcast. And we got one recently, and here it is. And the title is A Wonderfully Random Podcast About a Wonderful Show. Aww. 5 stars.
Hey.
From the intelligent hosts to the varied segments, it all blends together to make a random trip down my favorite show, a constant flow of quality entertainment. I disagree with some of the opinions, but the show encourages differing opinions in a healthy way. And this, I wanted to say, is from Patrick Perrin. Patrick's like an OG Pull to Open fan. So thank you very much, Patrick, for finally leaving a review. But we really appreciate it. We really appreciate you. And I really appreciate the spirit of this because, that's exactly what we're trying to do. Like Chris and I often agree. Sometimes we don't. We have healthy discussions about that. But we also, we want to put our opinions out there and we want to include everyone listening in that. So when you guys comment, when you interact with us on social media with your takes, we like to read them out sometimes on the show. And when there's sort of genuine difference of opinion that's done in good faith, let's talk about it. I think it's great. Like, there's different ways to interpret things. For example, I'm not a huge fan of season 6B, which is sort of arguably canon or arguably not. And I don't think it works or is necessary for the discrepancies that we see with the Trout and stuff later on. But a lot of people disagree, and that's fine. And,
them's fighting words. No, sorry. They're not fighting words. I'm encouraging your different opinion in a healthy way, Pete.
Yeah, exactly. Words are actually what we use in place of fighting, I think. So let's just use
concept.
Words.
What a
Craziness,
concept,
right?
We could even avoid concepts, conceptual wars on the high frontier. Yes, thank you for leaving that, Patrick. It's really nice to know that you consider us intelligent hosts, and a constant flow of quality entertainment is certainly what we try to provide. And speaking of which, it's now my turn to provide quality entertainment by failing to guess a Doctor Who title, a title of a Doctor Who story in emoji form in the segment we like to call the Who-moji Challenge. It should also be called the Tortured Chris Challenge.
Absolutely. And of course, Patrick did note he likes the varied segments, and this is now switching to the segment where I get to challenge Chris on his ability to decipher emoji and then spit out a Doctor Who title that matches those emojis. So,
please
sir,
don't be an in-space one. Please don't be an
this one. This one is pretty cool, I got to say, and it's actually from Jack, fan of the show. Jack, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing this. Jack Hustwaite, and he shared this with us on Twitter. And it is 3 emojis in the title. I better ask you, are you ready, sir, for the emoji challenge?
Well, now I know it's just 3. I'm ready.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, 3 emojis. First emoji, man doing the cross hands.
Okay.
Yep, the cross out hands.
Yes, okay.
Second emoji, the world, which is to say planet Earth.
Yes.
And then the last emoji, a baby.
Oh, no. Oh, dear. I'm sort of... now I'm thinking of the plot of 2001. The Star Child at the end of it.
So you got cross hands, world, baby.
Yes. Cross hands and world makes me think of Stolen Earth, but no, not that.
Good guess.
Okay.
It is not that.
Does it have Earth in the title? Am I?
It
can
does.
we do this Wordle style?
It does.
Okay, well that should narrow it down. Except it doesn't. Yeah, the stolen Earth, the baby is really throwing me off here.
You can see how it would.
Yes, the Earth covered, but it's not Children of Earth. That would be torture.
No, that's our other podcast.
But we take a random journey through Doctor Who spin-offs. Oh boy, the unearthly child. Oh my god! Oh
there it is. You got it. I was just getting ready for like the 7 hints I was going to give you to get you on the way here, but you got it. Nicely done, sir.
Oh my goodness! Yeah, we didn't. Old versus New Who would have helped, but maybe not narrowed it down too much. Oh wow! So our very first Whomoji title in the Codex is now filled in.
It is.
The very first
way
one.
to go, Jack! You got it.
Wow.
You got it. Listeners, you too can also be listed in the Codex. We obviously put each and every one of these Whomoji challenges in there. A Codex also in the show notes. And you also get credit. So please leave these wherever you can, wherever you can. Reach out to us on social media. The several places we're about to talk about. And
Thank you, Jack, by the way, for filling in that one. Oh my goodness. And now I'll never have to guess an unearthly child again.
Cool. And Jack gave us another one, and there's a few more that came in, so we'll paste those out over the coming weeks.
All right.
All right.
So, what else we got to talk about? We've got to talk about Spotify, where we offer you a different way to interact with the show, which is that you get to vote, because this is a democracy. We are not a draconian empire here. We have people power here on Pull to Open, and it isn't just about our ratings. As we showed for the Pirate Planet, where I gave the Pirate Planet a sort of a Dalek Banger hybrid. I think ultimately I went down on the Dalek side. It's part of the Pull to Open rating system that we will explain at the end. And Pete, you gave it a Viscount Banger.
I did. Yep.
And it seems from the votes on Spotify, where if you're listening on Spotify, if you just want to download Spotify and vote on your feelings about the Pirate Planet, for example, you can do that. And it seems that 10% of the people agree with you. However, 80% of the people agree with me, which means that they want a Dalek-led military government. So sorry about that. Whereas 10% of people thought the Pirate Planet was an Ogron.
Right? Weird.
Yeah.
I'm curious about that one.
Very curious too. Nobody thought it was a Professor Hater or a Fixed Point in Time. But hey, listen, folks, you can go and add to this vote, because we are not going to stop the count.
No.
The count gets to keep counting. We keep these polls open far into the future. So
you might say we pull them open.
Hey,
constantly.
Poll to open.
Poll to open. Oh, man. That's the name of the segment. Poll to open.
Hey, I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, guys, we're keeping them open for a long time. Maybe not forever, but well into the Shooty Gatwa era anyway.
That's right.
So go ahead, vote on Spotify and have your say on the Pirate Planet or any of the other stories we have talked about recently.
Yes.
Okay, I like this because it's basically confirming this is the Pirate Planet is very solid Doctor Who. Like everyone's like most everyone agrees this is like a good episode, and some people like myself really appreciate certain aspects of it and gave it a banger. And one of the things I really loved about it, which we talked about, was I think it has my favorite gag in all of Doctor Who, where they set up the techno babble in the first episode and they come back to it in the last episode without even making it obvious. So that was awesome, and we cut a video of that particular commentary for, of course, our social networks, including YouTube, where we're at youtube.com/pull2open, as well as TikTok, where we are at pull2open. Lots of great ways to interact with the show there, to comment and just get some more discussion going.
Yeah, just smash those buttons, all of them. The subscribe button, the notification button, the like button. Just be really enthusiastic and involved in our Pull to Open feedback loop by adding your feedback to
Yeah.
all of the above.
Pretend you're John Pertwee at the controls of a 26th century spaceship, and you're trying to do some maneuver, communicate with the person, hailing you, and you're just pushing buttons. You're just pulling levers. You're just doing stuff.
Yeah.
Just hit them all. Just go for it.
Just imagine your Eccleston with the hammer that he had attached to the TARDIS console. Just whack it.
Well, then, of course, not advice on how to take care of your equipment.
No.
So don't sue us if you don't decide to use
please
that hammer.
do not apply a hammer to your laptop, but smash those like and subscribe buttons and the bell icons. And drop us a line on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, Full to Open 63. So we've done with the feedback loop once again in a record 10 minutes. Good job, Pete.
Is it good, though? Because now we have to do something else, don't we?
Yes, we do. It is time, folks, for the beginning of the commentary on Frontier in Space. And, of course, we start off every episode with an in-depth political discussion of the background of the... No, we don't. We start off every episode with a super fast summary of the story that we're discussing. And we allot for this summary 30 seconds for every Classic Who episode, which is relevant here because this is a Classic Who story. And we have 6 episodes. So that means that one Pete Paschal has a record. Well, not really record because we've done more games. But you have a very significant chunk of time. You have 3 minutes to do this.
Yeah, I do.
It's fabulous. And of course, we, as really nerdy Doctor Who fans know, Frontier in Space was supposed to be part of a 12-parter. They really wanted to rival the Dalek Master Plan in the number of episodes. So it could have been, a slightly different decision by Barry Letts here. And Pete, we might have just watched 12 episodes. And you could have a whole 6 minutes to describe 2 stories, this and the next one. I'm not going to reveal the next one because it is kind of a spoiler that I'm sure you're going to come up with at the end of your dear. Yes, you might be surrounded with spoilers. If you're watching on YouTube, apologies for these spoilers in Pete's background. But are you ready, sir? Are you ready to do this in 3 minutes?
Yeah, I think so. I'm kind of like going over in my head how much of the how much editing I need to do and what's relevant and where the rabbit holes are. So I think I've got a pretty good sense of it.
I mean, maybe space opera is easy. I did come in under the wire on Ark in Space last week. It was a pretty simple plot. And, we're going to get into it, but there's a thing that happens repeatedly in this story that may aid you in your reduction of...
in fact, instead of trying to sort out when it all happens, I might just summarize it really quickly by a lot of this happens. But anyway.
All right, let's find out what this is with the official Pull to Open summary of the Frontier in Space in 3 minutes, starting in 3, 2, 1, go.
So the Doctor and Joe materialize on board a spaceship in the 26th century, and it's transporting some flour, but then it's attacked by this other ship, and then the humans are seeing that it's like Draconians, these people from this other empire, these sort of reptile-like people, humanoids. But really, the Joe and the Doctor can see it as something else. At first, Joe sees it as like this other, it's a Drashig or something. And actually, no, he sees the humans as a Drashig because everyone is being sort of manipulated by this hypno device to see the things that they fear most. So the humans see them as Draconians, but really they're Ogrons. Ogrons are attacking this ship. So they don't understand why. The Ogrons capture everybody and tie them up. They leave them alive. They leave. When the humans come to, they accuse the Doctor and Joe of being spies that work with the Draconians, who they thought attacked the ship. So they're taken back to Earth. They're interrogated. The Doctor and Joe try to insist that, no, these are the Draconians aren't attacking your ships. Even though on the other side, the Draconians are accusing humans of attacking their ships. So clearly someone is trying to manipulate both of these galactic empires. They're both huge empires here in the 26th century, Draconia and Earth, into having a war. And so the Doctor and Joe are constantly thrown into prisons back and forth. They're either captured by the Draconians or they're captured by the humans. And at some point, they're separated, and the Doctor is on the moon in a penal colony, and Joe is left on Earth. But who shows up? Oh, my goodness, it's the Master. The Master comes to collect Joe, and he's masquerading as this person representing a dominion within the Earth Empire. So he has this right to extradition, and he says that Joe and the Doctor are prisoners. So the president of Earth actually reluctantly says, you can go ahead and take them. So he goes to the moon, collects the Doctor after he sort of tries this aborted attempt to escape with some political prisoners. The Doctor and Joe are on the ship with the Master. They sort of screw around with it so that it actually drifts into Draconian space. The Draconians capture him. The Doctor talks to the Emperor of the Draconia, and he sort of knows the Draconians because he was there 500 years ago, convinces them to believe him, because what happens is the Ogrons show up and try to bust the Master out of there, but one of them stays behind. He gets knocked unconscious, so they're going to take the Ogron back to Earth, but the Master ship intercepts them. They take the Ogron, then they all end up back on Earth with no evidence, but then they realize that they really need to cooperate with them because they realize what the origin was of the war way back before, and so they go to the Ogron planet. They try to collect them, but guess who shows up? It's the Daleks. The Daleks are actually behind the Master's plans, who have been using the Ogrons and stuff. So what happens is the Daleks kind of come, and they're going to kill everyone. They leave because the Master wants to break the Doctor, but then that gives the Doctor a chance to escape, and so do the other folks who go back and save the war. And the Doctor and Joe leave in the TARDIS with the Doctor injured.
Wow. Okay. You did
kind of blazed through a lot there at the end, so I realized time was coming up on me. I skipped
coming up on you.
I skipped the airbag at the end that the Ogrons are like frightened of.
Yeah, you and Barry Letts skipped that airbag. Yeah, we should maybe briefly talk about that airbag and about the decisions that were made at the end to remove it, and the decisions that led to this whole thing. So we talked about the 12 episode structure, which is what they wanted. They wanted basically to bring the Daleks in at some point. But no, they decided they couldn't actually do it, and it wouldn't sustain. A modern audience in 1973 would not understand, what was going on here with 12 episodes. They couldn't handle it.
I think they would have had to write it differently, because it's such a pivot point that, the Master's whole plan and trying to get these galactic empires at war, and that's pretty much resolved at the end of this one. I mean, they're clearly distinct stories, like there isn't really a through line. You can watch this one all the way through, and you can watch Planet of the Daleks all the way through, and we'll get there when we get there, but it's a different guest cast, it's a different sets, it's just completely different, and you don't sort of fold back onto the story in the way, say, a Daleks master plan or a Flux or whatever. Clearly is intended to be sort of one story.
It's such a shame, by the way, that Delgado, of course, who died shortly after this, never got to utter the words the Master's Dalek plan. That is kind of what we're faced with here. It's a good thing to bring it. It's a good spoiler. I like it that the Daleks come in at the end. I think it was crying out to be used as a cliffhanger, maybe at the end of episode 5. Instead, you just sort of get the Doctor having a weird premonition when he's in a quarry. He looks around at the hills like, I sense a presence I've not felt in.
It's we can start there. We can start at the end, because it is such a big moment. I mean,
I was marvelously surprised this time, even though I remember. So I've not seen either, and I'm glad to hear you say that they do sort of work as separate stories, because I was sort of worried for a moment that we should have put them together. I remember this from the episode summaries in the 20th anniversary book. The Peter Haynes book, where they really get deep into. That's where I got most of my Classic Who knowledge as a kid, was just simply reading the episode summaries and imagining the stories in my head. So I had the vague
best way to do it, honestly, in a lot of ways.
Kind of. But so I had the vague memory of, like, is Frontier in Space a Dalek story? Why do I have the memory that it's a Dalek story? And as I started watching it, I was like, oh, the Master's in it. I must have been mistaken because the Master's the big reveal.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't come in for the first 2 episodes. By the way, because they could not get him contracted for that many studio blocks. That's why he was kept out of it. For the first 2 episodes. It was simple business arithmetic by the ever cheap BBC.
So did Malcolm Hulk, who wrote this story, then just go, okay, I'll just have everybody in prisons for 2 episodes and do a lot of padding to just keep them going back and forth and getting captured and recaptured.
Yes, and then the Master bursts in like Dr. Nick and The Simpsons. Hey, everybody!
But sticking with the Dalek thing, it's a good moment when they come out because it is kind of surprising. Maybe not entirely, because even though this is a Master story, he does say in 1 or 2 places in the script beforehand that he has employers, plural. So it really kind of narrows it down when he says that. Like, okay, it's either the Daleks. I mean, I guess arguably it could be the Cybermen that were thought about in the early days, like the concept phase of this story, where they're going to do the Cybermen instead of the Ogrons. I think that was floated. It was never done. Which I think was a great call, because you don't want the Cybermen playing second fiddle to the Daleks, assuming the Dalek reveal was still there. So at the to have the Daleks sort of large and in charge at the end, if you've been paying attention, you're like, oh, okay, it's either them. It was really either them or the Time Lords. If you think about it.
I completely missed it. The employer's reference. When does he say that? I feel like
he says it at a point. I believe when he has the Doctor and Jo in his power, and they're prisoners on his stolen police ship, and they're asking him, like, why don't you just kill us? And he's like, well, I would, but my employers want to see you, something like that. And then you're kind of like, well, wait a minute. So if the Master's not in charge here, so that's a good little tease. Yeah. And then when they come out at the end, it's like, okay, sure. So they have a good little moment that you might be anticipating, you might not be. It's a good reveal. I remember I watched this with my daughter, and she really liked the big Dalek reveal. Like, oh, when did this become a Dalek episode? And she was kind of excited. Yeah. My issue with it is that they never get to really do anything. They literally show up and then they leave in the next scene, and they don't get to be Daleks. They don't get to scream at people and say, obey, obey. They don't get to callously kill people, except there's a few people shot, but they're nameless, faceless Earth soldiers. And worst of all, they never say exterminate, really. I mean, they sort of talk about exterminating the Doctor later, but at no point do the Daleks get to just start scream exterminate before they're going to kill somebody, which is like, that's their thing. Like, why have the Daleks if they're not going to do that?
Yeah, they really should have been the episode 5 cliffhanger, and the cliffhanger really should have been them saying exterminate. But no, they are just the Master's employer here. They're just sort of swinging by like Lumbergh in Office Space, going, hey, Master, how's it hanging? We're going to need you to come in on Saturday. It's a bit weird. You're absolutely right. And they just sort of leave. They go off to their next management consultant gig. But, speaking of employers, it gets a bit war gamesy there at the end. That was something else I didn't expect. With the Doctor using his telepathic circuits in the TARDIS, I don't know if that's the first time he's done it with that, to basically snitch on the Master and summon the Time Lords. Now, is that a spoiler for anything in Planet of the Daleks, Pete? Are the Time Lords involved in any way?
Well, I don't want to spoil it for you, no, not really. I think what that is a setup, because he's hurt at the end of Frontier in Space. So basically, you need some way for him to then go to the Planet of the Daleks, because one. He's hurt. He can't really steer the TARDIS, and 2, like, he doesn't know where it is. So it's really like, where basically Time Lords, help me out here. I'm dying, all borderline, and I need some help finding where I should go next to stop this this bad thing from happening.
That's so weird. That's not something he's ever. First of all, like, who can't find Skaro? Come on.
No, it's not Skaro. The Planet of the Daleks in that episode is not Skaro.
Oh, okay. Yes. All right. Yeah. I've been blindsided by all the, but there's a lot of
I've said too much.
there's a lot of planet of it. Like they have to find the missing planet of the Ogrons
Right.
in this story as well, as you pointed out in the TLDW. Which is like, again, like, are the Ogrons really that masterful at hiding their world? It didn't seem like they had the intelligence or the wit to keep themselves off the galactic star charts.
Yeah, I feel like we should spend some time on the Ogrons for sure, because it's
yes.
one of our ratings, and this
Yes.
is the most Ogron-rich episode of all of Doctor Who.
So I wanted to ask you, first of all, could you, because we've had this rating system. Our rating system started as a wee star baby back at the beginnings of Pull to Open as just the Dalek and the Ogron.
Right.
We had the duality.
So thumbs up, thumbs down.
And then we added the Viscount Bang, and then everything else followed from that. But what was your thinking? Because you suggested that original system. What was your thinking in terms of Ogron? Was it like, do you feel that the Ogrons are the worst monsters in all of Doctor Who?
Arguably. Yeah, they're kind of bad in the sense they're not even anything.
Right.
They're just kind of this thing. And again, we haven't done Day of the Daleks, so I don't know the true background of that story. But from what I've seen of Day of the Daleks, this is the first appearance of the Ogrons is Day of the Daleks, and they are working for the Daleks in that one. It seems very clear from the production that they only had a few Dalek casings made for that, and so they needed some practical slave of the Daleks to do a good chunk of the action. So they're just kind of like low rent Daleks, essentially. Like they're just kind of like, the Daleks can't do X or Y, so we need something else to do it. And they just did the laziest thing, like, just hire some big dudes and give them some makeup and turn them into kind of ape things. And it's kind of like, it's like Planet of the Apes type stuff. Yeah. And so it's like, sure, but they're also really, really dumb. I mean, it's just really this sort of slightly evolved gorilla stand-in thing that just kind of the laziest writing to fill in the blank here, right?
And kind of some lazy writing here with the Joe literally offering one of them a banana.
Yeah. Unfortunate, but here they actually flesh out the Ogrons a little bit, which is like, okay, that's they're kind of okay here in that they're on screen more than in, I'd say, Day of the Daleks. They actually have lines here and there. We fear the Monster Master. Not great lines, but you do learn, they have a planet. It's on the edge of the galaxy. No one really goes there because it's in sort of, it's a bad neighborhood. And they just kind of do their things. No one really cares about it, but they have like some civilization, even though it's clearly like it's a quarry planet. And there's a monster that they fear, which, as we talked about earlier, is like the vomit colored airbag that sort of has googly eyes on it. It looks so bad.
It looks so bad, and you see it for a moment in the outdoor on film shots, and then apparently it just looked so bad in the studio, which is like, it's kind of weird. Barry Letts to choose not to include that, because like, when has a bad-looking monster ever stopped Doctor Who before?
Yeah, I know.
We just saw it in the Ark in space. Like, when did the fact that giant green dead queen hopping out of the cupboard and jumping on Harry Sullivan, or falling dead inert on it, like, you use what you've got. If you've got just a bit of bubble wrap and you paint it green, then go for it. Stare at that hand. So yeah, what you've got is sort of this confusing mess where the Ogrons are running away from something, and it's so set up for that monster to reappear, because we also see the Ogrons worship this creature, which is, to my mind, like that fleshes out the Ogrons more than anything else. Is to see them actually worship this creature. Like, I actually felt for them in that moment.
Yeah, so the
fear-driven life they must lead.
You're talking about the very end, where it's kind of the climax, and the Doctor and Joe are surrounded by Ogrons, and the Master has a gun on them, and it's super duper rushed. And so the reason it's rushed is, Barry Letts stepped in because they were going to have the blobby thing appear when the Doctor activates the Master Sphere Box. And they just thought it looked so bad that, like, no, we can't do that. So the editing is really choppy because they had to because they couldn't reshoot it, really. Like, so they had to chop out all the bits with the monster. So you don't really get a good sense at all of the action until it's all over. And so it sort of ends with Joe. She's got the Master's gun, and in all the confusion, the Doctor got shot. And the only reason I can understand from that cut is why the master ran away was that he lost his gun, right? Because I've always thought, like, well, wait a minute, like the master can resist the thing, like the fear box, like it doesn't affect him. Like, why didn't he just shoot them or take control? Well, obviously the Ogrons were just like freaking out and like running around and shooting at whatever. And so he just had to just hightail it out of there. And clearly Joe used the situation to like grab the gun or whatever. So that kind of works, but it was clearly not originally shot to do that stuff, all the things I just mentioned. And so it's just sort of this mess. And then suddenly the Doctor's on the ground and the Joe has the gun, and then they have to get in the TARDIS.
Shot by the Master, which is so, going to be echoed later in Last the Time Lords with the when the Master gets shot, the Doctor holds him in his arms. When the Doctor gets shot by the Master, then the Master just runs away. But yeah, let's talk about this unfortunate last appearance.
Yeah, let's get back. I just two more quick things on the Ogrons before we move on. So I like the psych on the structure that it's essentially like you're made to think the Daleks are involved because of the Ogrons, but the Doctor throws cold water on that and says, no, they're just interstellar mercenaries. And then you're like, okay, well, maybe not. And then there's the Master reveal, like, oh, they're working for the Master. And you just think, oh, that's great. Yeah, we could see the Ogrons against the Master, but then they loop back around. So it's a psych of the psych. No, actually, the the Daleks are involved. Boom.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Good. Really,
so that's smart.
21st century level plotting with that. Absolutely. I was fooled by that, even though, inner child me was screaming, no, the Daleks are in this. I was faked out. So good job on that. But yeah, let's talk Delgado. That because of that.
Last thing.
Yes. Okay.
I swear, this is my last thing on the Ogron. The line that I wish they'd put in is when the Master has his sort of triumphant moment. He has a bunch in this one, but the one where Joe is like, they've got the evidence. They have your man, your Ogron, and they're taking him to Earth. And he's like, you're talking about the guy standing right behind you? And the thing is, all the Ogrons look the same. But you kind of, what they should have had the Ogron just say, banana good.
You can just like hold up the banana peel like,
Yeah, like, because it seems like the banana thing was setting that up, right? Because now she talked to him, she gave him the banana, or like just have some callback to that interaction Joe had with that Ogron, and they don't do anything. He just sort of stands there. It's like, what a missed opportunity. Like, come on.
It should be like, what, you don't remember me, Joe? What, all Ogrons look alike, do they? Huh? I thought we had a moment, Joe. They had a
moment too. The hidden off-screen Joe Ogron love affair. Oh my god.
Yeah, the Ogron. Oh my god. Yes, forbidden love. The Romeo and Juliet big finish story that nobody asked for. Yeah. I'm sure Katie Manning would be up for that. This is my first vision of the Ogrons as well. Just to, I guess, if we're finishing up on the Ogrons, let me just get out all my sort of, I shouldn't really like them, but I kind of do.
Right.
I think partly because it was also like everyone in that era was doing their response to Planet of the Apes. Right. It was one of the biggest science fiction movies to date. I believe it was whoever was involved in Planet of the Daleks was directly inspired. Day of the Daleks was directly inspired by Planet of the Apes. We'll get there when we get there. But I just love that they're sort of like, it's Planet of the Apes, but what if they were bald? What if,
yeah, exactly.
What if they had like the tonsils? It's a very BBC thinking. Like, we'll have to spend less on hair this way.
I got to say, when you're a big actor, like a physically large actor, I imagine you get a lot of these roles. And it's funny that one of the Ogrons was actually Michael Kargarev, who also played the cyber controller back in Tomb of the Cybermen. Because he's like 6'5", and he gets, you get called for roles like this if you're that tall. Like, people like David Prowse, and there was an actor named Kevin Peter Hall who played the Predator and was also in that Sasquatch movie with Gene Hackman. Or no, it's not Gene Hackman. Sorry.
Yes, and of course we have in Star Wars the ultimate Planet of the Apes callback in Chewbacca. That was his reference. So that's where you go the opposite approach of like, what if Planet of the Apes but hair everywhere? They're kind of the Wookiees are kind of the anti-Ogrons there. I guess now we're on Ogrons. I'm just going to stay on Ogrons because I just want to throw in.
Okay, you go.
I just want to throw in one more thing about the Ogrons, which I just was reading about when they gave this to Australia. Australia has some weird things where it cuts out the violence from Doctor Who. Right, wants to give it a G rating,
but keeps the violence in a vault somewhere.
Yeah,
yeah.
And one of the things that they cut from the serial to give it the G rating to screen it on Australian TV was the Ogron looming over Joe, at the end of whenever that is, episode 1, episode 2. That's it, looming. Standing over her is enough to bump it up from a G rating.
I guess.
I guess the Australians found the Ogrons super scary.
Yeah, troublesome big dude standing over girl. I guess there's sort of some implications there if you really want to go there, but I think there's a lot of inference required.
Yeah, I think that's the Australian senses telling on themselves with that inference. Maybe they saw early the chemistry between the Forbidden Knowledge and Joe and the Ogron. And they were like, no, we must not have this. Okay, so are we done with the Ogrons? Now, let's move on to Delgado, because, of course, we cannot talk about this without talking about the fact that this was tragically cutting short the career and life of Roger Delgado. Doctor Who. He died several months after this was aired. He was running late to a film set. I just read the description of this. He's 53 years old, first of all. Absolutely tragic. Way too young. And he kissed his wife Kismet goodbye, got on a plane, and ended up in Turkey. And he was running late. And he usually liked to drive himself to the film set, but because he was running late, they gave him a chauffeur from the plane, and it was the chauffeur who went too fast round a bend in a mountain road and just careened off. And the technician was killed as well. It's absolutely tragic. Everyone was Doctor Who was devastated. And Doctor Who fans were devastated. I mean, there will never be another master like Roger Delgado. It is unfortunate. This was not supposed to be his last outing. There was going to be one final one the next year, in the next season, that they were already preparing. They were already started writing, in which the master would sacrifice himself for the Doctor and sort of bring the character around, to the end of his arc. And instead, we had to wait till the Deadly Assassin, and of course he regenerated, I guess, off screen.
Or degenerated off screen.
Or degenerated, yes. Did we ever have any explanations, do you know, of in any other media of what happened to the master after this? Yeah.
There are definitely other explanations. More than one, I believe. The one that I'm really only intimately familiar with is not intimately, but the one I read thoroughly was in a book called Legacy of the Daleks. And it's another kind of neat master working with Daleks episode, a story, and but it has the Eighth Doctor and the Delgado Master, and it actually it happens at the end of post Dalek invasion of Earth, and Susan's in it. But at the very end of that story, he essentially he's wounded and takes his TARDIS to some planet somewhere and sort of starts to degenerate. And it happens to be where Chancellor Goth is, as a sort of on some mission with the Time Lords. And so that's how they meet. And so that obviously begets the Deadly Assassin. So it functions as a bridge. I think there's been other stuff written. There's a comic called Doorway to Hell that I'm not sure if it includes that, but it also has the Delgado Master, an inspired choice, I believe, meeting the Capaldi Doctor, which kind of feels right, because you just mentioned he died when he was 53, and Capaldi was about 55 or so when he was playing Doctor Who. So it's you got some good age matching there. It just felt it feels kind of right.
My goodness, to see the two of them facing off. I mean, two of you got to say that the greatest and most suave actors ever to appear in the show. It's a shame that they couldn't. But it does. I guess his unfortunate, untimely passing did allow the show to reboot and regenerate the Master, which wouldn't necessarily have happened, because he's in it so much, and I think he himself was concerned, and this is why he has to be written out with one final show, because he would talk to casting directors and they'd be like, wait a minute, aren't you just like contracted full time to Doctor Who? You're in every damn story.
We have a role for you, Roger. It's the baddie. You're playing an evil professor type.
Yes.
Do you think you could do that?
Yes, you have some evil plot, some evil scheme, which is we should mention, by the way, this is sort of like we're sort of a little less surprised that the Master shows up a few episodes in, because we have been trained by the Anthony Ainley era. For oh, it's the Master. Oh my goodness, he was in disguise. Oh my goodness, he was playing this sort of weird Chinese wizard dude. But this is the first time that happens, right? Usually, if the Master's involved, he's kind of up front in the first episode somewhere.
Well, yeah, absolutely, exactly. And so it's in episode 3 that he comes in, and there's the reveal. And I got to say, in many ways, Roger Delgado saves this story. Yes. And because at this point in the story, and I alluded to this, the TLDW, and even before it, like there is a lot of pedantic back and forth of the Doctor and Joe constantly getting captured and put into cells and then escaping and getting broken out, etc. Like that's basically the story. Like I would wager it's probably like 75% of their time on screen throughout this story is them in cells.
And the Doctor tells so many stories when he's in there. I mean, there's the whole thing about the purple horse and the Medusoids, the mind probe, and
but basically,
rule number one. Anyway,
it's just super boring especially at this point in the story, and they're constantly talking to people and no one's believing them, which also gets repetitive. And then, boom, I almost said Anthony Ainley. Roger Delgado shows up, basically grinning ear to ear in his like Earth leather of the future with the sort of quasi, almost like a Time Lord collar or a prototype of it.
The collar really stands out. Oh my God, he has popped his collar.
And he is loving it. Like he loves that he's basically like, oh, you guys, all you can do is bumble around here in the 26th century and get captured. I'm actually large and in charge, impersonating someone from Sirius 4. And I'm great. You suck. Get in my thing. Like you got to do what I say. Like, and he's just relishing this. Oh, well, Miss Grant, you're going to you're going to spend the rest of the natural here in the prison, or you're going to come with me.
Yes, and of course she does, because of course you would. Yeah. Like even your worst enemy walks in. But he has some super scenes with Katie Manning where she resists his hypnosis, which is a wonderful thing for Joe
to great.
Finally do. She resists it by reciting nursery rhymes at the Master, and sort of looks at him so fiercely when she does that. It's such a great moment for Joe, who otherwise is kind of a damsel in distress.
It's too bad it takes like 5 episodes to get there to finally make this sort of a good Joe episode. But she does have that great back and forth with him, and it's like it's such a good defense, because like she says, she's like filling her mind with nonsense, but she's also super irritating him. Yeah, because it is like you're just saying these dumb nursery rhymes that are you just come on. I don't want to even.
Yeah, some of them are like nursery rhymes that kind of we don't really use anymore. I'd forgotten all of them. Some of them I'd like remembered from my childhood, but I hadn't heard since. Like it's an interesting series of them that she comes up with, and the Master gets to say, "Bah, I didn't like nursery rhymes anyway." He also, sticking with the Master, has that great scene with Pertwee. I think that one of their greatest scenes together is when they're sort of trying to out-argue each other in front of the Draconian Emperor.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, totally.
And the Master is kind of like, you kind of think the Master's all boxed in here because the Doctor knows the Draconian culture, like he knows the right thing to say to introduce himself. He's like, well, I am a Draconian Lord, hashtag hipster. I was with the 15th Emperor. You've probably never heard of him. I was actually made a Draconian Lord for helping the 15th Draconian Emperor 500
Look
years
it up.
ago. Yes, Google it. And yet, against all of this, the Master's still like trying to argue his case. Right. Like, don't listen to this idiot. And Delgado is almost charismatic enough that you think the Emperor is going to get taken in by it.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, don't listen to the prattle of these idiots.
Then he sort of
instead. I have an amazing collar.
He does almost a 180, and he just starts stalling.
Yes.
Because I think he's also heard the hypno device, and he's just like, okay, I've just got to like stall people here in the throne room for a couple minutes, and then my boys are going to come get me.
Yes. Did I ever tell you about the tragedy of Darth Plagueis? The wires. Yeah, he should be really stalling like the Doctor stalls there's that marvelous moment where they're trying to cover up like what they're doing and breaking out of the cell. It's their best in the cell moment, where the Master's sitting reading War of the Worlds
Right.
by H.G. Wells, which really, Master, you haven't read that one already?
Yeah, well, it's a little on the nose, but it's also I get that he's basically reading it ironically. So I think that's you could sort of justify it, like he's just kind of like, I don't care about your little.
He's very
war.
ostentatiously reading it in front of the camera, like being a bit of a book hipster himself. But the Doctor and Joe are kind of they're stalling by just having a conversation, like so that he isn't watching the screen. And the Doctor's basically doing recaps. He's doing a recap of the war games,
where he is just amazing in his defense. He's just, I took apart their arguments like left and right. Every time they said something, I said something 10 times as clever right back. I can't really remember right now exactly what it was, but it was awesome. And I just put them in their place.
You should have seen them sweating under those studio lights. I had them backed into a corner. And then I was like, you should send me to Earth. No, he doesn't. He doesn't
so there's actually a lot to like about that scene, but there's a couple things I don't like too. One is that the Doctor is the one who pulls like the file out of his boot, which is, fair enough that, someone's got to have it, but I feel like that should have been Joe. Yeah. Like if you think back to Carnival of Monsters and she pulls out like the skeleton keys and just reminding everyone she's a unit agent and she actually has some skills, I think is a good it's a good opportunity to do that. Like the Doctor already is the star of the show. He's already saving everyone constantly. Like give Joe a minute. Give Joe, throw Joe a bone here, please. Like,
yeah, exactly. Give her more than just nursery rhymes in her arsenal to wow us with. But yeah, I mean, Katie Manning is great, and she's often criminally underused in her stories. We are in her final season here, unfortunately. Yeah, she still doesn't get to do any secret agent stuff. So
there's also when the Doctor gets out of the cage and he goes outside, and Joe is essentially talking to the bed and pretending she's talking to the Doctor, and she's going on, and it seems a little bit improvised by Katie Manning here. But there is that bit towards the end where she's talking about like, oh, you really should give the Master a chance. He's always like offering you half the galaxy or whatever, and you should really like take him up on that sometime. Like, one, that just sounds silly. Like that's not something Joe would never say. Also, two, if you're trying to sort of like babble and babble and babble into the point where the guy's just ignoring you, don't say his name. Don't bring him up. Then he'll just like his spider sense will go off. So that kind of doesn't entirely work. But I do love, like, it might be my favorite line from Delgado in the entire thing, where he just walks right up. Thank you, Miss Grant. We'll let you know. Like it's just like, again, he gets a moment to be a bit triumphant there and be a little self-aware about acting. And
he has really smart. He also has a great moment where he's in the cage himself and he's so confident where they're being taken to the Draconian planet, and he just sort of walks up to the cage and sort of barks imperiously at the guards, who kind of then face him down with guns. He's like, oh, okay. They also, we should throw in, this is directly after Carnival of Monsters mentioned. Joe does twice see a Drashig. From Carnival of Monsters. And I didn't know this, but this also explains something about Carnival of Monsters, which is that if you showed the monster on screen for less than 30 seconds, you didn't have to pay any royalties to the creator of the monster.
Interesting. Well, the Daleks are on a little more than 30 seconds, I think. Terry Nation got a cut.
He got it good, but of course, he's writing the next one anyway, so he probably they added a little bit to his fee.
But that's interesting. She sees a Drashig. She also sees a mutant from the mutants, as well as a Sea Devil.
Yeah, so it's all very similar to what we see in the scope. What kind of scope was it in Carnival of Monsters?
Miniscope.
Miniscope, yes, thank
Yeah.
you. The creatures that we see, all less than 30 seconds, including the Cybermen. So poor old Kit Pedler didn't get his cut from the Pertwee era at all, because that was as we mentioned before, the only Pertwee Cyberman. Sadly, they were not. He must have been kicking himself that they were not the Ogrons. Didn't take the Ogron role in Frontier in Space. But
it makes me honestly the flashbacks to the monsters here obviously make total sense because they're recent adventures, but also it makes me think the famous publicity shot of John Pertwee sort of back on his heels with 3, I think, monsters advancing on him was shot around this time, where it's like, I think one of them's an Ogron, one of them's a mutant, and one of them's a Sea Devil. I could be wrong. I might be misremembering, but it's a pretty famous shot.
This was the 10th anniversary season, and of course, it was the season that kicked off with the 3 Doctors, which was shot after this. Comes before it in the running order, but Patrick Troughton wasn't ready when they were filming it, so they had to do this first. So they were trying to have classic monsters throughout it. They were trying to sort of show off monsters from across the range of Doctor Who, which is, I think, the reason for that miniscope scene, the reason for the one and only appearance of the Cyberman in the era.
Right.
Just let's celebrate 10 years of the show and all the monsters that we put together. Let's see how many we can pack into these episodes without paying the creators. Let's just have little cuts of them. But speaking of monsters, gotta give a big shout out to the Draconians. The first time we on Pull to Open have encountered Draconians, also first time I have. Is it the only Draconian story?
We've got Draconian bingo, but doing Frontier in Space. Like it's really kind of unfortunate they never went back on screen, at least, to do anything more with the Draconians. Now, they've certainly done a lot in certainly the comics. I'm pretty sure the Big Finish audios have at least mentioned them, if not done whole things on doing more with the Draconian Empire. But yeah, the thing is, like, just taking a step back, like, this is a 6-episode story, and even though there's a lot of repetition and padding with the cells and the capturing, they really flesh out this galactic conflict in both the Earth Empire. The Earth Empire is actually better served. There's more there because there's more scenes with the President and General Williams. But this idea of like 2 big galactic empires that have a frontier or neutral zone or something between them, and on the verge of war, and they fought a war, whatever it was, 20-something years ago. Yeah. It's a vivid picture. It's a canvas they are excited to fill in between Malcolm Hulke's writing and the direction. Yeah, you
almost want more of it, really. I certainly wanted more of it, because the Draconians, like, I did not expect them to be kind of this sort of honorable race. Like, they feel a lot like maybe Klingons in Last Day Star Trek, where the Klingons were treated more
exactly. I got that vibe too, but like it's clearly not Klingons of the 60s series. So this came before the later Klingons that you get in mostly the Next Generation, where they are much more, frankly, like this. They're, sort of Shakespearean courts and families and betrayals and all that going on. And a lot of that's alluded to here in just a couple of pretty decent minutes of exposition in the Emperor's court, where they talk about, like, there's a lot of politics that is played up on both sides, but in the Draconian side, the Emperor has some really good lines, I gotta say, where he's like, the guy's convincing him, you need the support of the houses to rule, and it's like, I'm not ruling if I'm just doing what the houses say. That was a good comeback.
Yeah, to his son, who is also the ambassador to Earth, which is useful to reduce the number of actors. It's the son, the ambassador, kind of is critically underserved in those last episodes. Like, he should have more lines. He's usually just standing at controls, but he's great. The Emperor's fantastic. The actor, I forget who it is, but my goodness, can he roll his R's? Like, he's got that classic Shakespearean sibilance going on. And it's like, yes, I am the Emperor because I have the most Shakespearean voice. This is how it works in Draconian culture. But yeah, I really felt that they were real. They felt like 2 empires. Like, I did love all of the Earth stuff. It's interesting you point out that, that there's this question of how does one rule, which would have been very much on people's minds in the UK at the time, since the Conservative Prime Minister Edward Heath was asking that very same question about, is it me who rules Britain, or is it the miners, right? And you had to tie it all into contemporary politics. Like Malcolm Hulke was basically thinking of the Cold War of the US versus the USSR. You know, Earth here is very US-ish. It's very sort of media-driven and media-focused. And there are these warnings that the military want to take over. So both the Earth President and the Draconian Emperor are under pressure from their own politics. You know, they both are afraid to look weak to a certain extent. Probably the Draconian Emperor less so, right? Because he's the Emperor, and like he knows that he just has to project strength at all times. The Earth President, who nice to see that they're female. You know, that's another reason for us, the vampires, to take us here after Harry being all excited that the High Minister in the future and Arctic and space was a woman.
Imagine being someone of the fair sex, being top of the totem pole.
Yes.
Hey, Joe.
Yeah. Yes, and you know, to his credit, the Doctor doesn't even point that out to show like when they're taking it in front of the president.
It's great because it's like, yeah, I would say there's other ways sort of to contrast the two stories, but it is one of the better things they do is exactly that. They don't make a big deal out of it. It's just like, this is it, and she's just there. So that's very smart. Yeah. So the Draconian stuff, it's interesting. Like, if you'd want, it's not, I don't want to unpack this too much because they're just trying to paint a canvas, but there are some things that are never really fully explained. Like, one is that you have these two empires, but it seems like they've essentially cut the galaxy in half, and one's on one side and one's on the other side. And there's virtually no mention of any other space powers or anything major, which again is very Cold War-esque, but you know, there were a lot of like other countries in the Cold War. And you would think they'd get at least a mention of other races, right? At least, like, not necessarily whether they're part of the Earth Empire or not, and then it becomes more like the Federation of Star Trek.
We do have mention of different political structures within Earth's.
Right. Yeah, well, that's good. They talk about like this: the Master represents Sirius 4 or something, which has Dominion status, and so that's like sounds like Colony Plus. You know,
which is Dominion. Isn't that basically what Canada was for a while, and Australia were Dominions? Like they had special status within
the Commonwealth or something like that. Yeah, and it seems to be alluding to something like that. But again, you don't see any other races. You don't see like a la the Star Trek. And again, you wouldn't. Again, it's Doctor Who, different budget. Is it really relevant to the story? But it does sort of paint a very uniform picture on both sides, which doesn't make a ton of sense if you think about it. I will also say, like, the Earth Empire is this strange, but I would say intriguing mix of democracy and I wouldn't say totalitarianism, but strange hints of oppression within it. Right? Then the best analogy or similar fiction that I can think of is like Starship Troopers, right? Where it sort of portrays Earth in this kind of sunny way, but then if you peel back the layers, it's you're really looking at a fascist society.
Gone a bit fascist, and we don't really get that in this story until we see the lunar penal colony,
right?
Where the Peace Party and they again criminally underused. And it is such a shame after being made to be so interested in this peace party on the moon, and we're sort of outraged by the end of it at the way that they've just been all put up there. You don't get to see any result. Like they get promised, you know, there are all these promises going on with the peace party, like trying to escape and promising this guy who helps them escape a pardon when they get into power. You know, you have that professor character up there on the moon, like it's really good stuff, and leads to Pertwee flashing the peace sign, which is kind of cool. This is, you know, Doctor Who joins the peace party. It's great, and you know, definitely would have read to contemporary audiences like, this is like, you know, the those peaceniks in the US, you know, battling against Nixon and Vietnam and all of that, like that.
Yeah, it's all very rich. They have that one character who he's in line with, and he's saying like he blew up something to get there, and you know, basically gives the Doctor the 411 on this right off the bat. You know, it's like, well, how long are you in for? What are you talking about? We're here for life, bro. And that, you know, again, hinting at this sort of fascist layer to the society. That's really good. I will say the governor or warden of the moon penal colony seems like he's basically trying to start his own karate dojo, and
Yeah.
everyone's wearing like blue geese, and it's like, all right.
Everyone gets their pajamas in this. Jo also gets her lovely prison outfit. Looking like she's about to do some judo as well. Yeah. Everyone looks. The Doctor gets these plastic slippers. Did you notice those?
I did see the plastic slippers. Yeah.
Like, did we really need to see Pertwee's feet that much? I don't know. That was a little weird. And there's this whole scene where they're dressing in the when they think they're escaping from the lunar colony, and they're dressing in. Really, those are not good spacesuits. Those are not going to help you, first of all. But also, like, you've got this long, sort of cringingly long scene of like Pertwee like taking his shoes off and putting the spacesuit on up over his feet.
Well, it happens again later when he's like putting, the going outside the which I forget which time, because he does it twice. He goes outside to do something, whether it's go on board the flight deck and confront the master or fix the ship.
Oh yeah,
in
he's
episode
fixing
5 or 6
ship all the time. My goodness.
Yeah, and he's always on strings, and I sort of I don't mind the strings so much. It's Doctor Who. Also, it would make sense you would want to tether yourself, particularly later, because they're not that noticeable when he's doing the thing with the master, but they are very noticeable later. But it's like, okay, of course you're going to tether yourself if you're doing some work outside the ship. So I don't mind that so much.
It would have been great to see a Kill the Moon-esque, external lunar scene if they'd ever got that, wouldn't it?
That'd be sweet.
But yeah, it does kind of, I remember thinking with New Who, when New Who sort of started, I think that maybe the Impossible Planet was the first where they start to have the Doctor in a spacesuit a lot, in like this bright orange spacesuit. And I was like, oh, that's a bit strange. I wonder if they did that a lot in Classic Who. Well, yeah, I mean, they didn't necessarily have him outside a lot, but like here's Bertrand, like he literally spends half a frontier in space in a spacesuit. Whether it's on the exterior of the craft or getting ready to go out onto the moon's surface, he thinks.
And he uses that Time Lord ability of sort of being okay in a vacuum for a minute or two by when he pulls out his oxygen tank to use the thrust to go back to the ship, which I assume meant that like his helmet was suddenly completely.
And then does he gets his like velvet tuxedo back and his bow tie back?
Somehow that's the thing. Like presumably because he's in the tux at the lunar colony, and then he's suddenly in the karate gi, and then he's back in the tux. Yeah. And I guess they just got his stuff, but he didn't get his sonic screwdriver back. So that's apparently left on the moon for the Earth Empire to reverse engineer, I guess, whenever they feel like it.
Or for the peace party to use to break out.
Ah, there you go. But he does constantly go back and forth, and it's like he's naked if he's not in his tuxedo. Like
really,
he just can't
sort of
get anything done.
You need a line where Joe says, what are you doing back in a tux, Doctor? And he, could use that great line from 30 Rock where he's like, it's after 5 p.m. What am I, a farmer?
So a couple other sort of quick things about the Earth Empire. They actually have a Bureau of Population Control that's mentioned, which apparently limits people to one child because it's, I guess, the Earth at this point in the 26th century is overpopulated. But this sounds very eerily like China's one-child policy, which is pretty universally now understood to be a terrible policy, even if you're trying to control population, because as China's facing now, it leads to a much older population, and that has very serious consequences for
and a mostly male population.
Yeah, that too. But I'm not sure if that was what they had in mind here, but
well, interestingly, the one-child policy was not implemented until 1980. So it's interesting to hear it talked about here, and I think, but you are very much in the middle of the era of the population bomb, which was something a book that everyone was worried about in the early 70s, and I think of this era, and I think of Monty Python, which would have been roughly contemporaneous. And there's a sketch where you have John Cleese on as sort of this know-nothing commentator, and he just says, "By the year 2000, the Chinese will be 3 deep," which I think sort of echoed a lot of the nonsense chatter of like, "Oh, the Chinese are just going to overwhelm us," like very sort of racist approach almost to that. But yeah, the Earth of the future, like I like how they're watching TV. They're watching TV a lot. Like there's a newscaster who is
Mhm.
played by the same guy. Speaking of John Cleese, who was in Faulty Towers and also in was it Planet of Evil?
John
That we
Cleese?
did. No. So the guy who's the newscaster in this
Mm-hmm.
in a Frontier in Space, we've encountered him already. He's older Billy Shipton in Blink. That
Oh
guy.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. Yeah, I remember that because he comes on, and it's great that Doctor Who has always had a history with problems with representation, and
Mm.
we've talked about it many times around the talents of Wang Chiang, for example, and
Yeah.
whatever else, and sort of really bad choices. But they did make an effort. And when they did do it well, or at least did it in a not embarrassing way, it's things
Yeah.
like this in Frontier in Space. Like, oh, the guy comes on, he's a black guy, and it's like, oh, again, nothing made of it.
Yeah.
Nothing. It's just that's the future, guys. It's like it's diverse, and that's like, all right.
Yes. Yeah, so nobody
So-
mentions that the president, who by the name, her name is Dora, apparently, and
Yeah, that wasn't
doesn't
done
get-
until later, though. She's
Yeah.
just the president here, so
yes, Lewis
canonicity
Mahoney.
questionable on the name.
Yes, Lewis Mahoney, by the way, is the name of the newscaster and actor. So yeah, great actor who I guess we've got a bingo on him now. I'm not sure if he
Maybe.
was in Doctor Who and any other ones.
But by the way,
any-
thanks for stopping me before I made my. It was a while before Dora's name was explored.
Oh no! Oh! Thank you for the. I feel like we need a dad joke corner.
Guys, we're recording this on Father's Day, and
Hey,
so
there we go. Top
as
dad.
an official top dad, I am.
Yes,
for those on
gotta-
YouTube, not on YouTube. That's what my shirt says.
You've got to have a top dad joke. Yes,
Felt
and by the way,
obligated.
I have just confirmed. Yes, we do have a Lewis Mahoney bingo. Those were the three
Nice.
roles: Frontier in Space, Planet of Evil, and Blink. Yeah.
Good on
Yeah,
you,
thank
Lewis.
Thank you for your service. And speaking of, so the president, Dora has a wonderful schedule. Her ability to multitask, you got to say, in the story is incredible. She's getting like a spa treatment while talking to her assistant.
Yeah, that was pretty
about,
good.
like who she's going to accept and reject. I love that the assistant like they're actually using pieces of paper in the 26th century. It's a wonderful thing. But yeah, the fact that they're watching TV, the fact that they're watching the riots take place
Right.
across the earth really sort of ups the ante.
and I like-
using real riot footage.
I like that her political rival is at least they tried to give an American accent.
Yes.
Which is a little stereotypical at the time. He's like obviously the rabble rouser, the guy who's pro-war. He's a hawk. But it is, again, you're showing the striations, the layers of this future society. Like I say, all the stuff I was saying about like, it's an empire, but it's democracy. Plus they imprison political prisoners and the one-child policy. And there's more stuff here. I mean, this isn't criticism at all. I think this is a very rich canvas that they're filling in. And I would have loved to see more Doctor Who explore this era and go back to this. And they have to some extent in the comics and stuff. But to contrast that with other eras that they've sort of fleshed out, we talk about the 50th century and we know a bunch of people who come from there and sort of what's going on. This is like a level up in terms of like what the setting is. Because usually 50th century stuff is usually people from there rather than visiting there. But here they really paint a vivid picture of a Star Trek like space opera background. Yeah. And it would have been great. Like, I mean, it's still there, I mean, Doctor Who, anytime you want to go back to it, RTD, go for it, because it is very, very cool.
I would love RTG to bring the Draconians back. I think they are. I mean, the masks are incredible. And Pertwee talked about this, the Draconians being his favorite monsters because he told a story at cons where, who knows if it's even true. It's Pertwee. That's sort of rule 1.5 that the Doctor lies, especially when it's John Pertwee at a convention. But yeah, he used to tell this story about how he was like talking to an actor in Draconian gear and kind of lost the sense that he was talking to it felt like he was talking to a natural Draconian. They're amazing.
Yeah.
Like you really believe the Draconians exist and they're not just guys in rubber suits.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like I get what Pertwee's saying there. It's, you're talking with someone, and you can pick whatever thing from Doctor Who, say the robot from Robot, which looks kind of silly. And if you're having a conversation with, after a couple minutes, you'll be like, dude, take that off. I can't talk to you with like wearing that dumb helmet. But with the Draconians, it doesn't look that dumb. I mean, it isn't ridiculous. It's like, oh, okay, I get it. They're, lizard-like people, and they have different hair and etc. And you get, as Pertwee has said, you still have the human eye, you still have full facial expressions almost. So you can have a real sort of human moment with these quote unquote monsters. So yeah, it's really good. I would love to see them realized with even better makeup, and maybe I would say, if I have a criticism of them, it's that there's not enough variety within them. You get the Emperor, and you kind of get everyone else, and even the Sun is a little too similar to all the other Draconians that you see, and you sort of have a hard time picking them out from each other, but for the costumes a bit. And I think there is room to do more variety within that sort of Draconian canvas. The Emperor is a little different. Like, he does talk differently. He does have a different outfit slightly. And he clearly has a different attitude. So all that's clear. But then everyone's sort of like generic Draconian 1, generic Draconian 2, et cetera, et cetera.
You sort of want to see the one Draconian who isn't into wearing green. Like, it's perhaps a Draconian goth. I got to say, one of the things that is kind of weird that they do from the script is there is actually a Draconian attack that's really Draconians in episode 2, when they capture the Doctor and Joe, or at least the Doctor. I think they only get him, but they really do it. That wasn't the Ogrons. And you're kind of like, well, hold on. Who thought that was a good idea? Like, what are you doing? That's going to spark an interstellar war. Aren't we supposed to be in the middle of this most tense situation? We don't do it. Yeah, I really lost track very quickly on who was stealing the Doctor and Joe from which prison. Like, it is just, it's almost a comedy routine at a certain point. And if it wasn't you would insert a bit of comedy about it. Yeah,
and that's honestly, it nearly fatally kills the episode. We've talked about it a bunch of times, but really, like, there is so much padding with that. And you really should have gone back to the drawing board, Malcolm Hulk, once you realize, like, your leads are spending upwards of 70% of the time as prisoners. Even though there's some good bits in there, it's like that's just not good. You've just got to go back and cut that back to something like 30-35% at the most, or it was just like way too much.
And most of those extraction teams sent to take them out of prison X scenes they're all like filmed in the South Bank in London. That sort of concrete brutalist architecture, which is really good, but apparently caused some problems with filming because there were a lot of homeless people hanging out. And they reputedly had to get actors in like Draconian costume and Ogron costume to kind of hover over these guys. Say, "Hey, could you move on, please?" Which is quite a thing to be doing on set.
Ogrons intimidating in real life as well, apparently. So maybe they were all Australian.
Speaking of the locations, you do get that lovely Draconian English country garden where the Doctor tries to escape out of that one. Which is,
that's
Draconians,
right.
They like their gardens. Apparently, very, very well manicured.
Well, especially if you have Dudley Simpson's synthesized music over top throughout, it makes it a little more dramatic. Gotta say, this is very full Dudley Simpson. So famously,
it's so synthy. It's so synthy. It's too synthy. It's too much.
It's kind of like the music in the Pertwee era all blends together, but it is very much like there's cues for everything, and it's like, here's the drama, there's a spaceship coming, and like I do like the Master's tune. He has a theme, and it comes in. Yeah, it's kind of like it's used a little bit when he's revealed early on, but then they play the entire thing when he first tries to hypnotize Joe, and it's the whole, and it's like, that's, it's always great to hear that. And this is, it must be the last time you hear it in the show, because it's Delgado's theme. And I like that idea. Maybe they should bring that back. Maybe I just haven't paid enough attention. But I like the idea of a master theme, and maybe they could sort of bring that back with the other masters. Maybe it has existed for Sim and others, and I just haven't noticed. But
well, it is. Luckily for Pull to Open, this is not our last time with Roger Delgado. So maybe next time we see him, Pete, I'll ask you to reprise the theme, the Monsters theme, at the top of the show instead of the sound of drums. So yeah, we can work away on that. Maybe we'll get some synths.
Yeah. So one of the things about getting thrown into prisons all the time, it really shows how bad security is at these prisons, not just for people getting busted out, but like they don't even bother to pat anybody down at all. Like the Doctor's thrown in prison with a sonic screwdriver that for some reason he has to reverse the polarity of to get the bolts out.
Hey.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, you just got to get that line in, I guess, when it's a Pertwee episode.
The polarity. Drink.
But also the Master is thrown in prison with a giant homing beacon, like the size of an apple, which has a big, very noticeable flashing light on it that he, for some reason, leaves right beside himself while he's lying down. Like you think even an Ogron should notice this.
Well, you say that Malcolm Hulk should have done something about this, and I sort of feel like he did, because the final prison escape is Joe's, and it turns out it was supposed to happen, like the Master expected it, and maybe that's why he had the Ogron bring her a soup spoon. What does she even do with a soup spoon? She tunnels out of the thing? Or?
Yeah, she does, and I don't think that's very well realized because it's a studio and it's hard to show that this is a dirt floor, and I don't think that's ever really clear. And I remember the novel of this one actually of that bit, because I think I read the novel after I saw it, and I sort of wasn't exactly sure what happened in the scene. But in the novel, they talk about it that she's brought a pitcher of water and a glass, and then she gets the spoon with the soup or whatever, and then she realizes, oh, if I pour the water on the soil, it gets looser and it's easier to scoop. And so she does that bit by bit, and she just quickly gets a hole that she can sort of climb through, because companions are about that wide. And
yes, another reason why we brought here right after the arc in space, where Sarah Jane is about that big, and just fits perfectly inside the ventilation shaft on Nerva Station. I guess they didn't want to. They would have had to cut that out because they didn't want kids to know how to tunnel out of prison,
especially if it's a dirt prison, I guess.
You almost want her to do like a Great Escape kind of thing, of like, letting soil out of the bottom of her trousers, or maybe a Shawshank thing. She could have had a Rita Hayworth poster up in the cell.
Well, how to properly escape from a BBC studio prison is a very good question, but there are other questions that we must answer as we talk more about Frontier in Space. And of course, those are the 4 questions to Doomsday. First question: why did the randomizer take us here?
Well, my goodness. I mean, it's I got to utter that trademark Pull to Open bingo card line of I am afraid of the randomizer, because to go from the Ark in space to the Frontier in space, it's a little spooky. It's also like, it feels like, the Ark in space was kind of space opera done, disappointingly. We were a little bit disappointed. And here it's like, the plot is so clear. It's like it's space opera done right. I think the germ of it is. I think there's a really good 4-episode story in here, but that was my immediate sense of like
generous. I think.
Okay, maybe it's 3
2 or 3 episoder.
Yeah, it's kind of well drawn, and I love just the little things like the cargo ship at the start, where he's like, that's my flower. Like it's, the guy who doesn't care about whether he's being invaded or boarded, because he's got a job to do, man. He's got some flour to deliver. He's just trying to live. And you do get those moments of like really fleshing out the world that, for all of the great speeches in Ark in Space, you don't really get that. You don't really get the sense, and you get in fact contradictions about what this future world is like, and they aren't explored like they are here. So yeah, from from bad use of space opera to goodish use of space opera. I was just sort of pleasantly surprised by it, that even though we were going back in time, it felt better. It felt realer. It felt like the special effects were better, oddly, in this.
Yeah, I think they get away with a lot of model work and the sort of glowy thing that happens when the hypnotic device is activated. So that gets a free pass on a lot of the stuff, because it's things are switching up and you're kind of into it, even though maybe not necessarily be looking great. I will say I do like the spaceship design in this one, because it is very unusual. And there's like even that first ship with the Earth shipment of flour, I guess it's a freighter of some kind, but it has these arms at the front, which you can, sure, they're cranes or whatever. Like I kind of just like those ideas, like, oh yeah, throughout this thing, and you figure it out, viewer, on what this is, because there is maybe there's logic to it, maybe there isn't, but you're excited to sort of headcanon it, so that's kind of good. But I'm actually a little less optimistic about the comparisons here, in that I think there are some weaknesses. Like we already talked about some of the structural weaknesses, but there are some script weaknesses here, I think, that demonstrate the switch flip that Hinchcliffe was trying to do in the Ark in Space, and trying to aim for something more mature and having sort of more adult themes and sort of more challenging material. Because there are some moments in here where I feel like Pertwee is doing that sort of juvenile dialogue, like that whole thing with the Medusoids, when he describes, they're like animals and blah blah blah, and it's just kind of dumb. It's a dumb resolution for the mind probe that oh yeah, just tell it the truth, and then it won't believe it. The computer just won't believe it. It'll blow up. I mean, it just sounds like a stoner solution to computer problems. Like it's
the Peace Party's solution to the mind probe.
Yeah, and I'm there's still some rich stuff. We all talked about it. There's good future world building, but there is some writing that is just sort of at a kid level here in Frontier in Space, that I think by the time Hinchcliffe pivoted, or because Hinchcliffe pivoted rather, this is some of the last of it you will see in Doctor Who. And then not made the last, but I mean, generally the show has had a more universal audience, rather than sort of thinking it needed to pander to children. But because that is on display here in a few spots. It is
a bit, but what else is on display? Seatbelts. We didn't mention that. I love that everyone straps themselves in. They're very even the master wears a seatbelt, folks. So ironic. But no, we should also talk about the randomizer. Does obviously love the TARDIS. We talked about this before. This does feature it's a low key TARDIS story again. The first sort of image of the TARDIS spinning in space is here.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
wow.
Very first. That is the very first time the TARDIS spins in space.
I'm trying to think.
You see it right at the end, like full on, which is kind of a nice way to end it. But you see it on a monitor, like in the early episodes. But yeah, first spinning TARDIS.
Yeah, you didn't really see the TARDIS spinning. I'm just trying to think back. You're right. Like even when he didn't materialize in space as such that much in Hartnell Troughton, and the only time I think we've seen it is in the War Games, where it's just kind of sitting there in space. So,
yes,
yeah, that's true.
There's the War Games connection, because the War Games is both mentioned, and then the Doctor sort of summoning the Time Lords at the end is kind of calls back to the War Games. Is it the first use of the TARDIS telepathic circuits?
I don't think so. I think he's used those before.
Right.
Because I think Time Monster they feature pretty prominently.
The fact that the TARDIS is stolen by the Ogrons is kind of interesting. Like again, it sort of drives the plot. It's got a bit of Marco Polo-ishness to it.
True.
The Doctor kind of has to pursue his stolen TARDIS.
Then I don't think you see the interior until the end, which was actually, we should note, shot during the block, I believe, for Planet of the Daleks, because of the editing they needed to do in the ending here. So technically that's directed and part of that production block from that story, and it's just sort of thrown in here. I do like that it ends on a cliffhanger, which is kind of a neat move here. And it's not. I will say the other cliffhangers do suffer a little bit. I think some of them are good, most of them aren't. I think one of the worst cliffhangers is like Ogron at console seeing blinking lights. And
oh my god, it's an Ogron from behind.
yeah, which was like incomprehensible because there were at least two great potential cliffhangers in the minutes before that, where the Doctor is thrown seemingly from the ship with the course correction, and then the Master's locking Jo in the airlock and is about to, space her at the touch of a button. Those are both much better, and yet they chose this one, which I guess for timing reasons, but it's just incomprehensible to me.
Yeah, I think they messed around during the writing process in terms of what the cliffhangers were here. But yeah, they're not cliffhangers, a lot of them. They're just chapter endings.
Yeah.
So yeah, not going to make any 10 best cliffhanger lists here. And they had such opportunity to do so with the Master reveal, with the Dalek reveal. So yeah, absolute wasted opportunity.
But in terms of evil plots, this might make a top 10 list because the stakes are high. So let's talk about now. What if the evil plot had succeeded?
All right.
Okay.
So the evil plot is the Daleks, yes? Or is it the Masters? Or is it both? Is it the Masters' Dalek plan?
Yeah, no. I do like that the Master has a moment where he clearly has designs to usurp the Daleks. Because it is the Daleks' plan. Maybe the Master gave them the idea. But the Daleks are the people who are secretly in charge. And you got a moment. And if you'd watch it on YouTube, that's a micro moment. And but I think we have to say it's the Daleks' plan to get the two space empires to fight each other. So if that succeeds, I think here's what I would presume: the Daleks essentially wise up at the end because the Master suggests. Because the Doctor say, "Okay, you're in our power now, Doctor, and we're going to kill you right here, right now." The Master's like, "No, don't do that. I want to show him like the galaxy in ruin and that I was better than him. And, this is, I wouldn't say the beginning, but like it's very mastery at this point where he cares so much about the Doctor and beating the Doctor. And that's really all that matters to the Master. And the Daleks are, for whatever reason, convinced by this in the show. But like in the evil plot succeeding part, I'd say the Daleks go, "What are you talking about, man? Like he's right here, right now. We're just going to kill him right now. Excuse me." And they just blast him, and then they kill the other prisoners. And then it's like, okay, sorry you didn't get to break him, but I think this was way safer, and let's conquer the galaxy now.
What is your weird compulsion with not killing the Doctor? Explain.
So that happens. The war breaks out. The galaxy's in ruin. The Daleks sweep in, take control. Now, with the Doctor gone, like, what's stopping them from now winning the Time War, right? Like, now they're in a much better place. And they become masters of the universe. They kill all other life, including the Time Lord. So basically, this leads to the Daleks, like, winning everything. And now it's a Dalek universe. But here's the thing. At some point, they would get to Legopolis. And they would realize there are other universes. And they need to conquer those too. So basically what we're setting up here is that, this is what happened in some other timeline. And you're going to, at some point for Doctor Who, you could have ultimate Daleks from this other timeline that conquered everything thanks to the space war encounter our timeline. That would be really cool.
I guess this sort of does bring up the question of like, why are the Time Lords like not paying attention to these to these things, right? Like, why does the Doctor have to summon the Time Lords when there's Dalek activity? Like, the Time Lords just not reading their news feeds. They just like not interested in international news. Kind of,
got a lot of faith in those transduction barriers. We're good.
I guess
just keep those on. We'll be fine.
Yeah, but at some point are they going to notice? I mean, maybe it is the, after this point, obviously with Genesis of the Daleks, the Time Lords are sending the Doctor on the mission to kill off the Daleks altogether.
It's coming up quick.
The next, it's coming up. It's not the next Dalek story, but after this. So like clearly they've overcorrected in the other direction. Like we've been really uninterested in the Daleks until now. Now we're going to get super interested in the Daleks, or at least. It's more like, I'm so bored of reading of the Daleks. Like, I don't want that in my newsfeed. Let's just wipe them out.
Well, one of the questions this sort of brings up when you think about what the Daleks' role is here is like, why didn't the Earth Empire or the Draconians sort of think about this? Like, hey, wait a minute, there's got to be some other space power. And if the Daleks were even known, that they might think they'd just waltz in. And I here's how I headcanon this, because I think it's still believable. Like, this is the 26th century, and at this point, I think the only really confirmed Dalek episodes that we've had prior to this are the Dalek invasion of Earth and the Power of the Daleks, like ones where they're shown to be like a galactic power of some kind.
Right.
So, in my view, those are sort of early Dalek conquest things that were sort of noticed, but they're basically, the Earth note on that was probably like requires more research, and this Frontier in Space / Planet of the Daleks is their first like big coming out party as like, guys, we're major players. There's millions of us, and we are going to challenge the galaxy and basically kick living thing butt all over this place.
You may only see 3 of us at a time, but there are billions of us. Billions. Billions. Just you wait till we're surrounding Gallifrey. You'll see.
So after this and Planet of the Daleks, they become much more known and a real galactic threat. And then I think this tracks pretty well with most of the stuff we see on screen. And I think a lot of the sort of Dalek Empire stuff and things from Big Finish, you could headcanon into that structure. So that's kind of what I sort of choose to believe here.
Speaking of headcanon, I think you've just given me the most amazing headcanon of like, why do the Daleks keep being forgotten? And I was sort of putting that together with this notion of the Ogrons kind of being their client race, right? Their client monsters. What if the Daleks were using the silence to make everyone forget them?
Interesting.
What if they sort of engineered a little bit of silent DNA into that? The moment you looked away from a Dalek, you completely forgotten there was a Dalek standing there, which is so opposite of the Daleks' nature, their shouty nature.
Pay attention to me! Exterminate! I'm sorry, what did you say? Exterminate! I'm sorry, what? Exterminate!
did you say explain? Because I forgot what I was even talking about.
Not bad.
Yes.
Not bad.
All right.
People
all right, so
sometimes-
it does. So the Daleks take over the galaxy if the evil plot succeeds here, which is
right.
bigger than you thought it was going to be when you started Frontier in Space.
You betcha. But speaking of forgetting people who may or may not be here, there's someone else in the background of this episode. And it is, of course, one Clara Oswald. And we have to find her. Where is the Clara Splinter? Clara Oswald, of course, splintered in time at the end of The Name of the Doctor. She is all over the Doctor's timeline. She's somewhere in every single story of Doctor Who doing something. What's she doing here in Frontier in Space?
Well, I think there are 3 Claras here, and she's the inspector of prisons in all of the on all of the planets on the Draconian planet on Earth and on the planet of the Ogrons. She's basically just kind of just a Jobsworth who does prison inspections and just encourages a very lackadaisical approach.
A general dog's body.
General dog's body.
Which is like Joe's line when she's talking about her role at unit.
Yes. Yeah, and she's just sort of like, you know what, do we really need locks on ourselves? We should always make sure that every prisoner is issued with a spoon, or, just, I don't know. There's got to be that explanation. That's the plot hole she's filling.
Oh, you wanted it escape proof? Oh my God. This is, you know what it said? My copy says, escape full.
Yes.
Like very escape friendly. That's what it was supposed to be. Dang
Provide
it.
proof of escape. I thought that's what you meant. You wanted a receipt for every escape that happens. My mistake. Maybe she's also up there on the moon helping out the space party because the Doctor has completely lost interest in the space party. Maybe she leads the revolt that finally takes them to power back on Earth, and the Professor character gets to be the next president.
Oh, I like that one because she doesn't have to be incompetent and she's not working for the bad guys, which sometimes to fill in plot stuff you need to do. So that's good. Yeah. I like that she's takes over where the Doctor left off on the Peace Party.
She's cleaning up the Doctor's mess, and then she can be the next woman president of Earth. And basically her schedule is like all spa treatments because, the Peace Party is in charge now. Everything's cool. There's no more war. And what is she going to do? But, just file her nails and answer party invites.
So that's good. I thought I thought maybe she was the person in charge. Maybe she's like with Earth intelligence, and she is keeping the truth from getting out about how the war started 20 years ago.
Yeah,
And
we didn't talk about that, did we?
she's back channeling with her Draconian colleagues and saying, no, keep your Emperor records to yourselves, and we can't have that known, because it's such a weird moment where John Renner Williams, who is the, ostensible military hawk here trying to convince the president to go to war, is the guy apparently responsible for the first war from 20 years ago because he shot down the envoy's vessel when they was convinced they were going to attack. And finally here, 20 years later, he finally learns that, they actually weren't armed and they were only in a battle cruiser because that's the way nobles travel. And it's like, you're really only finding out about this now? And like, surely was there any examination as to how the war started from anybody? And were those findings not made public? Like how, they seem just totally disinterested, the society, and how the most meaningful war in their entire history started. Like, do you think there would be no end to literature and TikTok videos about it? Whether, maybe there's some misinformation. Maybe that's what Clara's doing, putting out TikTok videos about that. But it just seems like there hasn't even been an inquiry. It's insane.
There is no Daniel Ellsberg with the Pentagon Papers, to use a very contemporary reference, to reveal the background of the war on this. But it's just sort of kind of, when you think about it. So, okay, General Williams and the Draconian military leader were supposed to meet in space with unarmed vessels, right?
I guess
General Williams notes that thinks that the Draconian ship is armed, so he fires on it with his ship that's supposed to be unarmed. So,
well, it's arguable. It's argued. Here's how you could headcanon this: is that he sees the armed ship, they're not communicating with him. He calls for help. And so he basically and I'm not sure if the script belies this. Maybe it does say that William's ship will open fire, but maybe he just radios someone one sector over that can get there in 2 minutes, come in guns a-blazing and blow up the ship before they destroy us. So that's possible. Or he was a bad person and decided to arm his ship anyway. He just basically betrayed the treaty right away. But there is an interesting echo here, and I don't know if it's been ever been addressed. It probably has, because it's so similar. But the way the setup for Babylon 5 is very, very similar to this. So Babylon 5, if you've ever seen it, the whole background to it is there was a war within the past 20 years or so of the Earth Empire and one of the other space powers. So it was the Minbari. And what happened was exactly this. There was a big ship coming to Earth, and it was there on a diplomatic mission. They were going to be nice and friendly, but the person seeing it was convinced they were going to attack and destroyed it first. And so this led to to the war between the two. It's like, this is the exact same story. So I don't know if J. Michael Straczynski, who obviously created Babylon 5, was a Doctor Who fan and just said, oh yeah, Frontier in Space, that's a good little setup. I'm just going to take that storyline. Not accusing anyone. I mean, people recycle stuff. So stories are similar. We were just talking last week about how the Ark in Space is essentially Alien, and there's this, cynical views of storytelling that there's only 3 stories to retell or something. and so you could say that, but it is an interesting echo, because they're both future Empire type stuff, Star Trek type stuff, both space operas. It's just
and Star Wars, It's a consular ship. We're on a diplomatic mission. This is a consular ship. Where is the ambassador?
There's always some duplicity. Something's getting blown up. Someone means something and something else. It's just how you start these stories, guys. It's just what happens.
Yeah, throw in a consular ship, see what happens, or a fake consular ship.
Anyway, still, I do prefer Clara cleaning up the Doctor's mess on the moon and just having her own adventure there. That's pretty cool. I think that's my preferred one.
Yay, future President Clara succeeding President Dora, who goes off to explore.
All right, guys. All right. It is time for the final question, the ultimate question, the only question that matters for Frontier in Space. What did we think of this story? Pulse Open rating system famously has 5 ratings, 2 of which appear in Frontier in Space.
Me too.
So there is the Dalek, which is, of course, what the rating we give to a good episode of Doctor Who. There's the Ogron, which we give to a not so good episode of Doctor Who. The Professor Hater, which we give to a not so good episode, but hey, at least they tried something. At least we learned something. And the Viscount Banger, which we give to the best of the best. And of course, the rarely used Fixed Point in Time, which is an episode that is beyond rating, defies rating, is usually something we say exists outside of the Doctor Who canon, but sometimes we just want to not rate it for reasons of nostalgia.
Yeah, just love it and can't admit that it's bad. You pointed out that we have Daleks and we have Ogrons, and I'm ironically going to rate the episodes that are mostly Ogrons Daleks and rate the episode that is mostly Daleks an Ogron.
So wait a minute, so you got 5 Daleks and an Ogron?
No, I think
I don't think that's right.
I'm going to throw in a Professor Hater there for one of the episodes. That's basically my breakdown. I feel like this is
this is the ultimate hybrid. This is a very ugly hybrid you have created here.
Also, I feel like the Professor on the Moon was giving off big Professor Hater vibes. So I feel like he's probably a descendant of the dear
So you've
Professor
got
from
an
Time
Ogron with an eye stalk and a tweed jacket. I'm picturing here.
Trying to tell you to concentrate on fish and chips. Yes. I think that's it. I can't rate this overall as less than a Dalek because I enjoyed it more than I enjoyed Ark in Space. And we gave that one a Dalek. And I feel like this was just more of an enjoyable romp overall, like for all its issues. But yeah, if you do want to get granular with it, if we are allowed to do that, and hey, we're allowed to do whatever we want here on Pull to Open.
Podcast.
Yeah, it's a podcast. I'm going to say, four Daleks, 1 Ogron, and a Professor Hater.
Nice. Wow. Mix well and pop it in your galactic empire until someone wins.
Mix well and leave it in a prison cell until morning, at which point it will have escaped.
There it is. All right. Well, I am probably not as kind as you, frankly. I'm rating this one a Dalek Ogron hybrid. Very aptly. I almost gave it an Ogron because, I've seen this a couple times, but this time I found all the prison back and forth stuff just so annoying. There's one thing to have your heroes be underdogs. It's another thing to just have them constantly in prison. And unless you're doing something along the lines of Chain of Command and Star Trek The Next Generation, where it's all about sort of a 1984 vibe and what prisoners go through and breaking them and fascism, etc. Unless you're doing something like that, you have no business keeping your heroes like under lock and key for this long. And it's really almost a fatal flaw in this, and it's saved, I said, by Delgado. Delgado shows up, and suddenly you're having a great time, more or less, and then he gets thrown into prison, and then you're just okay. Come on, like you're literally rolling your eyes. Still, you get a prison. Everyone gets a prison. Yeah, we talked about the rich future canvas. That's great. I mentioned Delgado, he's so smart too. He's got layers of sort of motivation here, and I like the bit where Joe sort of says, "Oh, he was outside the ship when he did your course correction." He already knows. Oh, he's not dead. Like, he's talking to him on the flight deck, but then the Doctor gets that chance to outsmart him there. Just so much good stuff with the Master here in Delgado's final adventure. But man alive, if there was any episode of Doctor Who I was screaming, "Get on with it" at the screen, it was this. So it nearly collapses the story. There were plot holes that we talked about. None of them are too bad, but there are a lot of them. And I got to say, the Daleks are just criminally underused. They come in, they don't get a chance to be Daleks. It's sad. Yeah. I get that the next story, it's really just setting up the next story, but come on, give them a moment. Let them say their catchphrase like one time. And I know they sort of do when it's like the fake Dalek from the thing, like he sort of threatens the Ogron to exterminate him, but that doesn't count. And the voices are bad. I gotta say, the voices were not good. They should have I don't know, like even now I would like to see a special edition with better Dalek voices. So anyway, I guess what I'm saying is good. Like it's there's parts Dalek, but so much is bad that it's part Ogron. Like I can't. It's not even a hater. You know what I mean? It's there's really stuff to enjoy, but there's really stuff that just pisses me off. So I can't quite come in.
Are you saying it's a 50-50 split? Dalek Ogron?
Yeah, I would say it is because those first two episodes are there's not a lot to redeem. There's just the Draconians, sure, but not much else.
Okay. I feel confident in my part Professor Hater thing because I think they were kind of trying something new here because Doctor Who had not really done anything this space opera-ish. But yeah, you're not wrong to say that there are missed opportunities in it. And I think there is, to your point at the end about the Dalek and the Ogron, like there really needs to be a scene of like, a really awkward scene of the employer, talking to the old employee who's now being ditched for the master. Like the master's come in as middle management, I guess. And, you need this kind of awkward scene where the Ogron is like, what did we do wrong? I thought we had a good thing going here, master of masters. Like, why can't I talk to you? Why do I have to talk to your middle manager now?
Yeah, well, we always got the airbag out there, you guys. Let's go back to worshiping that.
Indeed. All right, we should go back to worshipping the randomizer.
Indeed.
And
Let's
find
do
out
it.
where we're going next. So the randomizer composed of two elements. Pete has the first. It's the codex. It's our listing of every single Doctor Who story in non-random order. Weird. We have 302 stories in that. We've been through a bunch of them. Pete will tell me the number in a minute of the total stories we have left. And I will plug that into the Executor, played by random.org, which looks at bespoke randomness, the randomness of atmospheric noise. Interestingly, I was just talking to someone who has a copy of a book of a million random numbers that the Rand Corporation used to put out in the 50s because there was such a need for non-computer generated randomness. You can't really get true randomness.
And it was the Rand Corporation, really? Like, was there?
It was the Rand
like our name kind of sounds like random. It's the first syllable, so we feel obligated to do this.
And they literally put out a book with a million random numbers in it. I mean, I kind of want to get one of these books for Paul to open and just like flick through it and like
do it.
You can tell me page number and like we'll do some bibliomancy here. Instead of using random.org. But until then, random.org is the executor. It does use atmospheric randomness. It does use numbers of Ogrons and Daleks and possibly Draconians, although they may be Draconians who are actually really Ogrons, bouncing around the atmosphere. Pete, what is the number? How many stories do we have left?
That would be 215 remaining Doctor Who stories.
Wow. 215. I know the crowd goes wild every time we mention the reduced number, but it just seems like a moment ago we were at 220.
Right.
The podcast grows up so fast. So we'd like to issue challenges to the randomizer.
That we do.
Before we go to the next location, Pete, where would you like us to go?
Okay, so you mentioned we worship the randomizer. I'm going to be down on my knees here, deferring to it, but also begging, please, randomizer, take us to New Who. We've had a 10-episoder, we've had 4 episoders, we've had a 6-episoder just now. I need something shorter. I just need something shorter this week. It would be great if we could just get a nice, straight-up episode of New Who, 48 minutes roughly of time. That would be great. Just give us a light week, please.
Yes, I'm basically going to. I want to ask the same thing. I wonder if I could maybe short circuit the randomizer by asking it to take us to another Draconian episode.
Well, maybe but, I could be wrong. There might have been like a really quick miniscope style shot of one sometime. So if there is one, take us seconds. There. Yeah.
Or take us to something else that sort of fleshes out the internal politics of a culture, the way that Frontier in Space does so successfully. To give us a sense of not just, this is what Malcolm Hulke was all about. Like, don't just give us, uniform monsters. Have a single political culture.
I like that, although that kind of invites long episodes. notes.
It does. Maybe playing with fire here, but like, take us to something. Maybe take us to Cold War, like another sort of.
Yeah, it could surprise us.
Surprises was the most Cold War inspired episode of Doctor Who, perhaps.
There you go.
Isn't Frontier in Space? All right,
do something with that randomizer. All right,
yeah,
you ready for your countdown?
Ready.
4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's 44.
44. Well, let's see where we're at.
It's Old Who.
We're at the mutants, so it completely ignored me. Completely. But speaking of fleshing out politics, we got some stuff going on here.
Yeah,
so,
the mutants. Who wrote that one? Do we know?
Mutants, I don't know.
Is it another Malcolm Hulk?
Could be.
Because it was around about the same era. It's the 4th serial, the 9th season. Wow. Directed by Christopher Barry. No, Bob Barker and Dave Martin.
Oh,
but Terrence Dix. But it's another Barry Letts joint. And another...
More Pertwee.
More Pertwee. The randomizer just can't get enough of Pertwee.
Six fine episodes of John Pertwee in the Mutants with more Joe Grant.
God.
I mean, it just got a taste, and now it's like let's keep it going. Let's do more. Let's get some more synth music.
Oh God, is this also another like it looks space opera-ish?
I'm still convinced that basically the randomizer is getting back at you for your comment in the Ark in Space that like, if you're just so tired of Pertwee by this point, which you're not wrong, but now it's like, oh yeah, you think so? We'll make you get tired of Pertwee, Christopher Taylor.
Oh, I'm sorry, randomizer. I'm so sorry.
You may be tired of Pertwee, but of course you'll never be tired of Pull to Open, which is why you want to subscribe to this podcast or follow, if you will, in your Apple Podcasts app. Whatever you are encountering us on, whether that's YouTube or social media or whatever, please go ahead, follow, subscribe, ask for notifications, and leave a review if you can, because they really do help the show. If you're on Spotify, hey, we just gave our ratings for Frontier in Space. Now it's time for you to do so. It is, the poll is open. You can go ahead and vote, and we will describe those results in a future episode. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Martin West, for your music as ever. And we will see you next time for The Mutants.
See you on Solos, folks.